Namaste. Welcome. My name is Sarah Singh, and I'm the host of Artist Shakti Talks, where we explore the mystical path of Kundalini awakening. Today we have a special guest, Nicole. And Nicole, to begin, I just want to share how we know each other. We have connected and sort of been like internet friends online through a lot of various mutual groups that we share on Kundalini. And it's just been really incredible for for me personally to be able to be in these groups and meet people like you when we have these unique spiritual experiences that maybe people in our everyday lives won't always be able to understand. So I just want to share my gratitude for that. And to begin, if you could just give me a little brief background about yourself, your life, where you're from, I'll let you take the floor.
Sure, I'd be happy to. First of all, I'd like to say namaste, and it's so wonderful to be here with you. You're such a beautiful soul, and it's truly an honor to be here. I just think what you're doing, all of the different groups that you're moderating, and it's very beautiful. It's very educational, and you can tell that you really know and you really put your heart and soul into this. So thank you for that. So for me, it's interesting. My background, is that what you said? My background?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, I've didn't realize it. I was one of those people that thought I had a rather sudden awakening. And I think most people that think that, if they look back, they will see that there were steps, there were things. So, I mean, I could honestly take it all the way back now, thinking I was, and I didn't even know that this was a thing. But I was born with a pre-birth memory. I remember being up somewhere in a universe, I suppose, and coming down, and that's it. I've been involved in groups that say that that is a pre-birth memory. People have them. A lot of them, they can travel into the womb, like they have the whole scene in front of them. I don't have that, but I do have this, and I've had it ever since I was a teeny tiny child, that I remember being up and coming down out of the universe as a soul. So yeah, I think, and then, you know, looking back on my life with spirituality, I had come from a unique background where I was not born with, or I'm sorry, raised with religion per se.
Mm.
My father was Jewish, my mother was Christian. Neither were very devout in their practices. We didn't go to church. My father taught me, or taught us as children, about how to say some prayers and light the menorah, and things like that. So we had a little bit of background. But the interesting thing for me, when you're a kid, and especially growing up in the United States, we have sleepovers, or we did. I think they're not so prevalent now with um, the state that the world is in. But when I was growing up, we had sleepovers, and I would stay over with my friends, and I would be drugged. I grew up in a very small town, a
Mm.
couple, 1,000 people, and that was it. And we had one church, and I would be drugged to that church with friends, and I loved it. I remember coming home and telling my family, I really enjoy this. And they had a youth group, and they had a choir, and it was
Mm.
Episcopalian Christian church. So we got involved, and my father converted to Christianity. He had always believed in the story of Jesus. So, I had that. And then we moved, and I got away from the church, and I, started, practicing in nature with certain things. And then I just kind of got into Buddhism in my 20s. So it's always been something there,
Mm.
something that I've been searching for, something that I've been longing for. I just didn't know that until I had the awakening. Um, I went through a very tumultuous relationship, and coming out of that, I was very focused on healing. I honestly, The interesting thing for me, and going into the Kundalini a little bit, everyone's stories that I'm hearing over the past few years are dark nights of the soul after the awakening. Looking back on mine, and I don't know if how prevalent this is, but I very much feel that my dark night of the soul was prior to the awakening. I had shut down. It was during COVID. I'm a nurse working during COVID was insane. It was wild.
I
Um,
bet.
and then I have a child. So on my days off, I'm doing the at home learning with my child and realizing that he has ADHD and dealing with, my growing relationship with my partner. And there was so much stress. And I just shut down and I withdrew. And I honestly felt like I was on the verge of a psychotic break. I couldn't handle anything. And during that time, I had a girlfriend who was going through Kundalini yoga teacher training. So
Mm.
she was teaching me Kundalini yoga, the breath work. I was familiar with breath work. I was familiar with Buddhist mantras and chanting, though I didn't do it, devoutly or daily even. So I started delving myself into those practices. And that is when the awakening happened. Within months. And actually, let me back up just a moment that I had also have a background in Reiki healing. I went through all the attunements in my very early 20s. I'm now nearing 50. So I wanted a Reiki master course, like a recert, just to kind of get back into it. So I went back to the girl that originally taught me, and it was interesting because what she did during the very end of the chorus was very similar to some of the things that I experienced during the full rising that happened. So it's so hard to pinpoint when this started for me. I feel like
Mhm.
it's my whole life. It's my whole life. And it was building to this, and I'm sure it's past lives, and it's all of the work that we put in. So that is a little bit of a background on how I got to this place.
That's beautiful. I really resonate a lot with what you're saying about just sort of constantly, um, sort of like there was always like a connection to spirituality there in for your entire life in hindsight, and then especially reflecting and looking back, how things almost seem to be like building up to awakening, and it was always there. I definitely have had that experience as well with eh, reflecting and looking back. I was like, wow, there were signs even before I realized,
Yeah.
before things started to manifest and happen. It was like almost like premonitions.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about when it started. Like, when was the first thing that happened that suddenly you realized, oh my God, this is like an out of ordinary experience? What triggered it?
Um, it was a massive experience all at once. I was asleep. I was awoken from a dream very suddenly. I typically have very boring dreams. I'm at work, I'm at home, like, I don't have extraordinary dreams. Every once in a while, I will have a very vivid dream. And now through the process, I realize that those are spiritual dreams. They're messages, they're information. So I was awoken from this dream where something, and unbeknownst, I had no idea what this was, but all of a sudden something was cutting my knee, my left knee, very deeply, very slowly. It felt like somebody was dragging a knife across my left knee, deeply and slowly. And I shot up. It was terribly painful. I shot up out of bed. I'm looking around for the culprit. I'm like, and then I realized I looked down, my knee is unremarkable, and I realized it was a dream. I go to the restroom, I come back, I get really comfortable in bed. So I'm very awake at this point. And I lay down and my feet started vibrating. I was like, well, that's a really interesting feeling. I've never felt prana kundalini energy prior to this experience in this evening. So my feet were vibrating, and then I was like, well, that's really strange. And it was very subtle. And I was like, that's interesting. And it intensified, and it came up to my calves started vibrating. And when it got up to my knees, it just stayed at my knees for a while. And I'm a nurse of almost 15 years. At this point, I thought I was having a seizure. I'm like shaking, it's vibrating. I knew it was my energy field, but I also like clinical. So clinically, what is happening to me? So I started to almost panic.
Mm.
And right before I could panic, it flew up my body out of the top of my crown. And it was just bliss. It felt like fireworks. My eyes are closed. I'm seeing, or I guess imagining fireworks coming out of the top of my crown and falling around, gosh, I can barely say the story, falling around my shoulders. And it was just bliss. It was intoxicating, divine bliss falling all around me. And the second I thought I could stay here forever, I went out of my window. My soul went out of the window and I went through the universe, and it was slow but fast and beautiful. And I was just enjoying the experience. And then I got close to a white light. And it seemed that there was a hand extending down to me from the white light, and I touched it, or I reached up to touch it. And as I touched it, I asked, did I just touch God? And I was back in my body, just like that. No beautiful trip back, no nothing. It was over. And strangely enough, I went to sleep. I didn't stay up thinking about it. I didn't question it. I just drifted off to sleep.
Oh my
And
God.
I know, right? Like, how does one do this? Um, so I went to sleep and I woke up the next morning, and I walked around in bliss for days, and I didn't tell a soul what happened.
Wow.
Was trying to I just wanted to keep feeling how I felt. It was magical. It was beautiful. And I was just crying, and I was just so filled with that divine bliss and love. And then once that kind of wore off within a few days for me, I started researching, like, what is this? What happened to me? And, here I am doing Kundalini yoga, not knowing anything about a Kundalini awakening, not knowing anything about any of this. So I found Kundalini awakening, and I started researching all of the things and listening to all of the teachers and the masters. And I was like, okay, yeah, this is what happened to me. And then it sent me on the journey. So that was my experience. I've had a couple of strange things happen. They always happen during sleep.
Mm.
I've always awoken out of sleep with downloads and messages and visits. And each time it wipes me out. Like, I just fall right back to sleep. I don't have any time to really think about it or analyze it after it happens. I just fall right back to sleep, very happy. It's such a strange and beautiful experience every time. So yeah, that is what happened to me. And I told my best friend, of course, who was going through the Kundalini yoga training, and she was like, wow. And I ended up telling my partner, and I told my parents, and everyone so far was very supportive
Mm.
of what I had gone through, and just thought it was an amazing experience. I've learned since then that, you shouldn't share the exact experiences that happened to you, that they're private, they're personal, they're specifically meant for you. Okay, yeah, I totally get that. And I also think that not enough people talk about it. And I think
Mm.
that by me sharing the exact experience that I had, that it might bring understanding. I want to say validation, but that's not really it. I want to bring an understanding to those who may have experienced something similar to what I experienced. I think it's very important to talk about these things. I don't find it, I don't know the word, blasphemous is all I can think of. I don't think it's a sin to talk about these things and exactly what happened to you. And I think what's more important is what you do with that afterwards.
Mm,
These experiences are happening for a reason, and it's not the experience itself. It is to break you down and build you back up and let you know where you are and who you are in this world. And I'm an advocate of afterwards. I don't care about the experience. It's beautiful. I'm grateful. It changed my life, but it's not about that. It's about who you are at your core and what you're going to do with the information that you've received.
mm. I love that. No, that's really beautiful, and I completely agree with what you're saying about how it is a very sacred, like intimate and personal experience, and I do understand how a lot of people feel and how it's traditionally taught to not openly share spiritual experiences. But I think given the context and like the state of the world and how a lot of people in the Western world who are unfamiliar with like the phenomenon of Kundalini awakening, and then they start experiencing these things and they don't understand what's happening to them. It's really important for people who are going through it to share so that they know they're not alone, and to just be able to have an awareness, and like you said at the beginning, like an education too of what's happening. And I also really liked how you shared how blissful the experience is, and not because sometimes people they may get attached to that experience and then they struggle with integration to it with their everyday life. And
Yeah.
so what I hear from you when you share about it is that you really value uh, being of service with the information that you've received and like the guidance that you've received, and not so much that you want to just like stay up in samadhi and be like bye guys.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
you're like I want to come back and I want to help, I want to guide, and that's one of the most pure things that I've always felt about you, and just your online presence is that you're very humble, and that you really value having a sense of just authentic guidance to people. And we need more of that. Like the spiritual community needs more of that because there's a lot of darkness out there. There's a lot of put downs. There's a lot of people guiding who are corrupt, which I know that we've talked about before, and we both experienced, different teachers that we no longer follow for various reasons. So, I'm wondering what what you would say if you have any advice for anyone who's like still struggling with awakening, what advice you would give them.
Actually, I have quite a bit. I think patience is key during the beginning. I think research is necessary. Um, I think listening to other stories is extremely helpful.
Mm,
I think people that are searching to have these experiences, I would almost say the same thing to have patience. I know that a lot of people are looking for experiences through medications and drugs the psychedelic drugs that can enhance these processes. And I have absolutely no judgment against using those means, but I would like to highlight that they're a shortcut. Um, and eventually, if you really want to progress on the path, that is also a crutch, and you're going to have to do the work anyway.
mm,
So I don't necessarily support using those. I know that they have been helpful for people. So, if that's what people choose to do, but I do see them as not being the most authentic. And for me personally, I'll share. that I do have a history with marijuana use when I was a teenager and into my early 20s. I never really had any spiritual experiences during those. And I live in a state that recently I'm in the US and I live in a state that recently allowed marijuana as a recreational use. So I recently tried it. I said, oh, we can do it, legally now because, I grew up in the 90s. And first of all, I didn't care for the strain that I had, and it was extremely potent from what I was used to back in the day. And so anyway, long story short, what I realized after, maybe two or three experiences is I want these things that I experience, these spiritual happenings, to be while I'm sober anyway. It just it just helps me more. I don't want to be I don't want to be high. I don't want to be having these experiences and wondering afterwards, well, was it chemically induced? I want to know that the divine worked with me while I was sober. So for me, that's a very important thing to talk about. Um, Other advice is, you know, Kundalini awakening is painful for a lot of people, for most people.
Yeah.
And the body hurts. It just does. And it can be in so many ways. For me personally, that dream that I had where something was dragging a knife across my left knee, I have suffered with left knee pain going through this process for about 2 years, which prevented me from doing a lot of your classes online because I couldn't even sit in a cross-legged position.
Oh my God.
So yeah, it was really bad. And what I learned dealing with that is that I wasn't fully surrendering to the process. And that is the biggest thing. Kundalini is trying to change you into your most divine self. And
Mm.
if you're working against her, she's gonna make you know it, she's gonna humble you. Uh,
Surrender.
yeah,
Surrender.
it's surrender. Once I really started being honest with myself during this process and taking inventory of everything that I was doing and not doing,
Mm.
then I was able to correct that. I now have better motion. It's not fully healed, but I'm working on it. And we need to be working on ourselves. So once I really got down to the humility of it all and made the changes that I needed to make. I wasn't completely sticking with a vegetarian diet. I was eating meat occasionally, drinking wine occasionally. Once I finally was like, my knee hurts. And I'm like, she's telling me you're not living your authentic nature. And it's getting better now that I am. And we need to listen to her. She's speaking to us in pain and in messages. And speaking of pain, like I said, this journey is painful. It's painful emotionally. It's painfully physically.
Mm.
Um, I hear a lot of people online talking about they're so painful they can't get out of bed. They can't go to work. I can't. I'm hearing a lot of I can't, I can't.
Mm.
And you absolutely can. And you need to work. You need to pull up that energy and do your life. You have to take charge of your life. You cannot let this debilitate you in the way to where you can't get out of bed and you're on disability and your life is in shambles. That is not what Kundalini's purpose is for you. It is for you to understand that you have to make changes in your life. And one of them is to put your all into it and get up out of bed and go to work and live your life. Um, if I can do it, you can do it. And I worked painfully with my knee and leg pains and
Yeah.
all sorts of experiences that I was having. I did it anyway. And I'm really sad to hear that so many are succumbing to the pain. And I think that people really need, like, if you're one of these people that are lying in bed and can't get up and don't have the motivation, you need to really take a good hard look at your life. And what is it that you're not doing? What messages are you ignoring from the
Mhm.
divine? What changes do you need to make so you can get out of bed and go to work? Because you are responsible for you at the end of the day. Nobody else is, and nobody's going to come down and save you. Um, these are divine messages, and please don't ignore them. So that is a huge thing for me because more often than not, I am hearing, I can't, I can't, I can't. And I don't know if you've experience this with anyone. I don't know if you're listening to the stories out there, and but for me, it's more prevalent than it's not lately.
Yeah, I have seen that. I've seen I'll just be very honest because I have had a handful of people like with the work that I do reaching out, and they're really badly suffering in states, and then if they come to me based on being a Kriya yoga instructor and having practices to share to help aid the process, they sometimes will come to me with an expectation that I'm able to sort of just solve the problem for them, and that if I'm not, then they then just, stop talking to me. So I think the problem that people are having, and I think it's something from the conditioning in our Western society too, unfortunately,
Yes,
is this sort of idea that someone's just gonna fix it for us, that we just need some quick fix,
yes,
and whether it's a medicine, just like you're saying, like we're always just looking for like that instant gratification, that instant quick fix, and not putting in the work ourselves, not putting in the transformation and the changes that we need to do on our own. And in this process and this path is not meant for that. And if it has selected someone there, because a big thing that I have also seen and have partially personal experience with is people will use substances and they'll trigger awakenings within themselves and they'll not be ready, and then suddenly they'll be very fearful, very lost, and not know what to do with it. And that is the situation where it's like, well, of course, it wasn't your own work to initiate the process. You artificially did it, and now you're unable to manage it. And so those people who are that now stuck in awakening, they will have a really hard time until they surrender, and like Ma, like Shakti Ma will continue within them, in their environment, in their lives, guiding them until they surrender. And she's very loving, she's very compassionate, but she takes no nonsense.
she will
So
humble you. She will humble you. Yeah.
oh my gosh. Yeah. Um so I really love the insights that you're offering and sharing to that. And the other thing I would mention just about substances too is that, so I follow a really great teacher, David Frawley, and I'm continuing to study his course in Vedic counseling, and he mentions briefly how, there are sacred like plant medicines, and
Hmm.
that's just meant to inspire us to see a glimmer,
Yeah.
and then beyond that, it's we have to then put in the work to maintain it, sustain the energy, sustain that heightened level. Um, it can't just be artificially produced. So it's all within us. And I mean, I was just talking about this with a couple who used to take my class in person at a local studio I was teaching in. How it's so interesting how we can take a foreign substance and it releases chemicals that are already within our body. Kundalini is already within our body,
Yeah.
and how the techniques and the practices do the exact same thing. We can use our breath, we can use our bodies, we can produce the same experiences in, like you're saying, like an authentic way. So I really appreciate that, that perspective and that emphasis, especially within the society and the messages that we sort of always have this attitude of not wanting to put in the work, and to be able to just buy something that's going
Yeah.
to solve it for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's so true. Oh. So what is your sadhana look like now?
Um, it is, that was a long process for me too. So for so long, maybe about a year, my first year, I would meditate at night. I knew I had to meditate and do my breath work and do my mantras. But I did it all at night and I was so excited. Couldn't wait to nighttime to sit down on my mat and do my sadhana. And yeah, that was not just it. And the teacher that I had, he's like, "You got to get up early. You got to do it." And I'm like, "I already get up so early. I'm tired. I don't want to." And I finally made the commitment to get up at like 4:30 in the morning. And man, did it really take off after that point. I was like, "Oh, this is what it's supposed to feel like." I really, there is something magical about the early morning hours. And yeah, so I do it every day. It's my favorite part of my day. I look forward to getting up really early. Everyone's asleep. I have developed my own way of doing it, and I do it quietly. I do my ohms in a whisper, and I love it. My whispered ohms
Oh,
are my favorite part of the beginning of my sadhana. If you've never whispered om, give it a try. I'm completely in love with it right now. um, it just it brings a really it brings you up here. You're up here in this space because it's quiet.
yeah.
um, it's just a different feeling, so I love that. I start that way and I do my breath work and do my mantras and do my puja, and then I sit in meditation. My meditation is really taken me everywhere. It's been quite amazing. I also have something to say about the meditation, to just let it be, and it's going to be what it is. You're going to have all kinds of things happen to you during meditation, and
Mm.
sometimes you'll go through a few weeks of the same kind of thing or the same feelings arising during it. You're going to work through things. You're going to realize the things that are arising, that you're stuck in. It's such an integral, intimate part of your practice. Um, and you, I don't know how people survive this process without a sadhana. It is the only thing that has that, and grounding and surrendering are it. That's what you have to
Mm.
do. You have to put the work in. You have to get up and do the things, or you're going to be miserable. And I choose not to be miserable. I choose to put the work in. Um, you got to take some time learning what path is right for you, in your spirituality.
Yes.
I mean, Christians, Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, we all have different ways of practicing, and Kundalini is universal,
Yes.
not specific, even though there's a whole system of it. From India, it's not specific to Indians or to anyone. It's available to everyone.
Mm.
It's the Holy Spirit in Christianity, and all of the videos that I remember seeing where, people are in a Christian church and they're shaking, and that's Kundalini. They're feeling it, it's interesting. And to back up a step, you were asking me before the awakening, were there signs? There was one. I was having kriyas and not understanding that they were kriyas. I thought I
Oh.
had leg syndrome. My legs would kick and shake, and um, I couldn't get comfortable. My back was always uncomfortable if I sat too long. She was telling me to get up and move. She was telling me to do stuff, and I ignored it. I didn't understand it was her. So there were a few things that were happening for about a year before I even started the Kundalini practice, where my legs were kicking and jumping and my back felt weird. And
Wow.
yeah, so I'm just like, oh, you know, and I'm medical. So I always had something medical to attribute
Oh my
it
gosh.
So, I mean, there was a point in my life I was working night shift as an overnight nurse, and I would come home and I would take Benadryl to go to sleep. And Benadryl has a side effect of causing less restless leg syndrome. So I'm like, I have restless leg syndrome from taking Benadryl. Maybe, but interesting enough, once I had the awakening, the legs stopped kicking. Every once in a while it'll happen, but she was kicking constantly. I would sit on the couch with my family. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm moving around and I'm shaking my. I don't have that anymore. So to me, that was Kundalini. It wasn't necessarily restless leg syndrome. So, you never know. And that's another point. People I think need to, if they have had an awakening, not be so quick to also just pass everything off as Kundalini,
Yes.
Shakti. Like, be sensible. If you're having symptoms, get them checked out by your doctor first. Just don't assume everything is and ignore something that could actually be problematic for your system. And she doesn't want that for us either. So, but if you go and you get checked out and you're fine, then I'm gonna, yeah, it's spiritual. So
I had someone recently who came to me for private counseling. It reminds me of that, and he had a very bad physical ailment, and he wanted to know that if this practice could help cure it. And I said, well, you still need to you can't, like, if doctors recommended surgery for you for a physical problem, even if it's a spiritual element, it's still manifesting physically in your body to a degree that would need medical attention. So I can't like to as someone like accountable and like looking out for the welfare of someone just be like, "Oh, yes, like I can just solve it for you. Just don't do the surgery that's being recommended." I was like, "No, you should still do that." So that's a really important piece that should never be overlooked, and I really appreciate
absolutely. I personally had a MRI done on my knee. Just it was so painful. Um,
Mhm.
and I have arthritis and I had bursitis and it was a flare up. And there was that there. But did it manifest? To me, it manifested from my resistance to doing the changes that I needed to change. But the psychic stuff manifested in an actual ailment. So it does happen, and we do need to listen to our doctors and maybe get a second opinion, but definitely don't just discount the whole medical field just because you've had or are going through a spiritual awakening.
Yeah. It's all energetic, but still you need to take care of your body. We're still physical beings.
Absolutely. Yes,
So I wanted to also talk about, because I know you have a bhakti practice, and a lot of people who go through Kundalini awakenings, including myself, will not have any experience with like Hindu deities, but or have any like background in terms of like conditioning or being taught these different types of gods, and then they may suddenly have in-person encounters with them. Could you tell me a little bit about how you found your bhakti practice?
absolutely. So I had been going to a Buddhist temple near me, and I loved it. It was beautiful, and we weren't going every weekend, but we would visit occasionally. And I was like, but there's something more. There's something more going on, and I needed that bhakti, and I love Buddhism. I do, and they have their own way of being devotional. But it just, for me personally, it was pushing me somewhere else. So I started looking for Hindu temples near me. Oddly enough, about 10 years prior to all of this, maybe 15. Oh gosh, back in 2009, I was writing. Oh, however long ago it was. I was writing poetry, and I still do occasionally, but I was huge in a poetry community online. And I had written a poem, and I didn't even know it until many years after I look back now going through this. And I was writing about Kali. I didn't know who Kali was. Like, where did this stuff come from? I was writing about God and realized, and this longing. I thought I was writing about romance. I wasn't. I was writing about the longing for God. So, oh gosh, I just went off on a thing. What was your question again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so how you
Oh,
developed your bhakti
all
practice.
right. Yeah. So bhakti.
That's beautiful though what you said. I
Yeah.
really want to hear those poems.
I'll let you read. It's interesting. So I went on this search for Kali and and Hinduism, and I needed to know more about these gods and goddesses and more about how Kundalini was in my body and what I needed to be doing. I know I needed to be doing something. I had no idea what that something was. I'm like, I need a guru. I started listening to Ram Dass, and I still do. Ram Dass is my cozy blanket and warm cup of tea when I'm having a bad day. He calms
Oh,
me, and I've probably listened to every podcast that's out there and read everything. And um, so I'm like, I need to know more about Hinduism. I'm listening to his stories of him and Neem Karoli Baba and all of the Sri Siddhiman, like all of these people. I'm like, oh, I need to know this. So that's what kind of spawned my interest. And I joined an online satsang of about 10,000 people, and was kind of reading and started responding a little bit to some threads. And someone reached out to me from a Hindu temple down the street from where I lived. And I was like, interesting, because I wanted to go there, but supposedly the place wasn't really open. So I didn't want to just show up, and I didn't really know anything. So I didn't know who to ask or, what to do. So one of the sadhus there reached out to me, and he was an American, and I went, and we became fast friends, and he introduced me to bhakti, really just by watching him practice and what he did, and seeing how moved he was. We would chant different songs and do some kirtan together, and he would be moved to tears by the divine. And I wanted that. I was like, I want to feel that, I want that type
mm.
of connection. So he taught me how to do my practice, and taught me how to figure out who my Ishta Devata was. And um, I started buying different murtis, and looking up different mantras for their Maha mantra. And you're supposed to have, one. I was exploring all of them. I didn't care. I'm like, I'm on all these paths on the mountain. I'm gonna play with them. I'm gonna play with the divine, and just enjoy. And so that's how it happened for me until, I finally developed my own practice. Yeah. So, and I would
Good.
go. It was that mandir that I would go to. It was Buddhist, Hindu mandir. So they had a Buddhist temple, and then they had the Shiva temple, and so I could go do it all, and it was very, very beautiful and very inclusive, and um, was exactly what I was looking for. So,
Oh my gosh, I love
yeah.
that. What stood out to me when you talked about witnessing someone crying with the tears from connecting with God, that is like one of the most beautiful experiences,
Right.
and a huge experience that's come about through awakening is the transformation of like association with tears, because it
Yeah.
before it was like this like sort of it's a, I don't want to say negative, but it was a sign of sadness and suffering. But
Hmm.
now tears have turned into like this sign of purification,
Yeah.
of like renewal, of being so touched. And it's just, I love crying. I love crying. I love and there's like a saint every time that I see him in my mind's eye, or I feel him visiting me. I always just cry and cry.
Right.
It's just,
It's that merging with the divine.
yeah,
It's unbelievably beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any closing thoughts?
Um, yeah, I do. It's all about love. It, it's all about
Mhm.
And it's all about finding that space inside of yourself that is the divine. We have it in us, and we've always had it in us. Kundalini is trying to transform you and shed those layers and make you realize that it is who you've always been.
Mm.
And for me personally, I become like a Neem Karoli Baba devotee as well. And his his phrase is love everyone, serve everyone, and remember God. And that phrase will be forever in my heart because that's what it is for me. Um, it's not about the experiences, it's about loving everyone. Love your neighbor as yourself. It's about serving everyone. My sadhana is my family. It is my work. At times, Kundalini can make you think that you need to go live in the Himalayas in a cave somewhere to figure this all out, and you don't. Your life can be, you don't have to become a renunciate. You can be a householder. You can have all the things and still um, be devotional, and you can do all the things that you want to do, and you can serve those around you, and you can find ways to serve your community, to serve your family, to serve at work. It's
Yeah.
interesting. I'm a nurse, and my partner, he works at a warehouse. So he's like, "Oh, I just work at a warehouse." I'm like, "But you're serving." He works at a medical warehouse. He was
Mm.
considered essential personnel when we were going through the COVID crisis. I said, "You're serving the medical community. You're helping to save lives, and you're not even, aware of it." I was like, "So that is part of your sadhana, going to work and getting out the medical supplies that people need." So, no matter what you're doing, you're servicing people out there.
Yes.
And let that be your motivation to get you out of bed, go to work. If you're in the wrong line of work, change it up, find a way
Yes.
that you can feel comfortable in your job and see it as your sadhana and as a way of servicing others, as a way of servicing God, because we're all God. We have it in us. Um, and
And
then,
that
and
ties
remember,
back into what you, sorry to cut you
no,
off. I just
fine.
wanted to briefly mention how that ties back into what you started sharing at the beginning in terms of this sense of integration that so many people struggle with and lack between their awakening, their spiritual selves, and then their everyday life, and how you've sort of managed to make it become one, and realizing that like someone's purpose, someone's dharma, that in itself is an act in a spiritual practice through their day-to-day life when they're fulfilling that, and to not lose that sense of spark and that sense of devotion to God through those practices. But at the same time, if someone is not on the right path and they feel it's depleting them, then to find, okay, what will fulfill your artha dharma, your monetary needs, and fulfill your purpose right now with God. And it changes. It
Yeah,
changes. I know,
yeah,
like the line of work I'm in now, it's not going to be the line of work I'm in longer term. So it always changes and adapts, and we can always trust sort of what comes in front of our path is what we're meant to be doing right now. It's active service
yeah,
in different ways we don't always understand or know.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well,
Mm.
I guess we will close out here, and I hope you enjoyed talking with me and
Oh
sharing your
my,
story. It was such a pleasure to hear, and I look forward to still being online friends
oh
all the time.
Oh, thank you so very much for having me. I thoroughly enjoy it, and I just absolutely adore you. So I'd be happy to come back anytime, and I look forward to your future interviews and podcasts. So thank you for including me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nicole.
Oh,
We'll tune out with the chant of one Om, and feel free to join us next week for our following podcast. Om.